Occasionally, I'm asked the question, why do Christians not observe the Sabbath day? Now, from the outset, let me make this statement. There are some groups who claim to be Christians who also claim to continue to observe the Sabbath day. And so we cannot make a blanket statement in this regard because certainly there are some who do believe in continuing to observe the Sabbath. And those questions are ones that would need to be answered by those individuals who do believe that you can be a Christian and should continue to observe the Sabbath. But what I can tell you is why I do not observe the Sabbath and why I do not believe that Christians are still to live under this command to observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. Well, the Bible teaches that the Sabbath was given only to Israel and only from the time of Moses until the time of Christ. It was never meant to be a law for all people across all generations. Today, we do not live under the old law. The old law was fulfilled in Jesus' death on the cross. He took it away, he nailed it to the cross, and he ushered in a new and better covenant, as the writer of Hebrews tells us. We live under a new covenant. We live under the law of Christ, not under the law of Moses. So I want to share just a few brief points with you today that explain why most Christians do not observe the Sabbath. Well, the first point is because the word Sabbath is not found in Genesis. There was no Sabbath command, example, or punishment for anyone from the time of Adam to Moses, indicating that it was not a universal law for all people in all dispensations of time. Also, because the Sabbath was not revealed until the time of Moses, it was officially made known at Sinai. Therefore, it was not made known at creation. Therefore, this was not an eternal command that was to continue on for the entire length of time that man is on this earth. Also, because we find that the Ten Commandments were the covenant and special sign given only to one nation, that being Israel. It was not given to the entire world. And so the command to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, this was a command that was only ever enforced upon those who were of the nation of Israel. Also, because the Sabbath was given to remember a certain event in Israel's history, that being their deliverance from Egypt, according to Deuteronomy 5 and verse 15. And so this event was one that was special to that nation. It was not something that would have a special significance to all nations during all ages of time, but only for the children of Israel. Also, because there was only one law for Israel. And we find that that entire law, according to Colossians 2, verses 14 through 17, was nailed to the cross. Jesus fulfilled that law. He took that law away, and unless the tenets of that law were reiterated under the new covenant, then those things were fulfilled. They are not to be practiced any longer. And we find that this is because that old covenant, including the Sabbath, has been replaced by a new covenant. And Christians today, we live under the law of Christ. We do not live under the law of Moses. Galatians 6:2, Ephesians 2:11 through 19, among several other passages, address this fact. Also, because the Old Testament feasts, like the Feast of the First Fruits and the Feast of Passover, the Day of Pentecost, and the things of that nature, they foreshadowed the significance of the first day of the week, pointing to Christ as the first fruits from the dead on that day. Mark 16:9, 1 Corinthians 15:20 and 23 address this fact. And also to the first fruits of the kingdom on Pentecost, also that took place on the first day of the week, Acts 2:1. Now, because Jesus rose, the Holy Spirit was given. And the church began, as we see in Acts chapter 2, began on the first day of the week. The Holy Spirit came upon the apostles. And they began to preach the gospel on the first day of the week, not on the Sabbath, as we see in Acts 20 and verse 7, and also 1 Corinthians 16:1 and 2. In Acts 15, we see the Jerusalem Council listed several things required of Gentile converts. But Sabbath keeping was not one of those things. Also, the Bible never says that the Sabbath was changed to Sunday, or that Sunday should be seen as the Christian Sabbath or the Christian's day of rest. Also, if Sunday were the new Sabbath, then Christians would be under Sabbath day travel restrictions, meaning many congregations could not assemble and therefore would not be able to exist. Many Christians would not be able to travel the great distances that they have to travel to assemble with their brethren. And so this would not take into consideration these difficulties that it would place upon Christians. But also, something that we need to keep in mind. Paul says in Galatians 5, 1 through 4, that binding the old law causes us to be separated from Christ, and we will fall from grace. And so we need to be very careful when we start pulling things from the old law, whether it's the Sabbath, whether it's dietary restrictions, whether it's the use of instrumental music and incense and candles and the titles that were used by religious individuals, whatever the case may be. If we start bringing things over from the old law and try to impose them upon those living under the new law, Paul says very plainly that that will separate us from Christ. We will no longer be in his favor. We will fall from grace. And folks, this is because Christ has set man free from the law of Moses and has given us a much lighter yoke to bear. So we have to ask ourselves the question, are we going to follow Moses or are we going to follow Christ? Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today. Please consider these things we've discussed and have a blessed day.